I know this isn't very interesting. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just talking. It's a podcast or whatever. Like, put it on and do your dishes. I don't know. Hey, y'all, and welcome back to Random Keto. I'm Charlotte, and as you can see, we're doing a little bit different of a style of video than I normally do. I'm going to be discussing today how I lost 50 pounds in 5 months and kind of the beginning of my keto journey. Now, this will be posted sometime very early in January, so obviously with the new year comes maybe some New Year's resolutions, and certainly for me, some reflections upon the previous year, lessons learned, all that good stuff. One of the very major things that happened for me last year was going on keto for the second time, but this time for good and with a different perspective. And I guess I kind of wanted to explore, just chat with y'all about the difference between my mindset, talk about the first time I tried keto and why I failed, and the second time and why I've been successful so far. I'm just going to start from the beginning. So my mom is a type 1 diabetic, so I've always had an extremely vague understanding of blood sugar and how that works. But I have observed that that's more of a general understanding than a lot of, at least people my age, know about how your blood sugar works. Insulin, pancreas, type 1 diabetes versus type 2 diabetes, etc. With my second pregnancy with my son, which I will try to leave his name out, we'll just call him George. When I was 33 weeks pregnant, so pretty late on my second screening, they went ahead and diagnosed me with gestational diabetes. Okay, so they have you take these nutrition classes. I never went to an in-person one. Again, they were all through online. This was the time of COVID. Yay. So I did my own research. I went home and I researched, and of course it talks about including more fiber in your diet, more veggies and, fruit and yada yada. And it talks about making sure you have protein with every carb that you eat and trying to have complex, whole wheat and stuff like that. Okay, so the guidelines that they give you say that you have to have a minimum, it's basically a range of 150 to 200 grams of carbs a day. And at the time, you're working with total carbs. There's no, I didn't know anything about net carbs, anything like that. So that's a lot. So I joined a forum. I started listening to the advice, but I joined a forum for women who had gestational diabetes during pregnancy. And I kept seeing over and over again these women talking about the fact that their blood sugar, as they got further along in pregnancy, got harder and harder to control, particularly their fasting blood sugars. So I started getting worried about that. My blood sugars were fairly controlled, but I did notice that my fasting blood sugars were borderline what they wanted them to be. So I was really worried that basically any second my blood sugar numbers would start getting harder to control. So I started looking into basically more ways to control blood sugar. I came across a lady named Lily Nichols. She basically talked about the fact that the guidelines are garbage and they're having you eat way too many carbs, and that obviously the best way to keep your blood sugar from spiking is to reduce your carbs, a lot. And she talks about how women naturally go into ketosis even when they're eating carbs through pregnancy very often, sometimes even in their sleep. She talks about the fact that babies are very often born in ketosis. Okay, so she just talks about that you need to be reducing your carbs a lot, you need to be eating lots of fat. The guidelines for me were very clear that you could hurt your baby if you did less than 150 grams of carbs. You would hurt their brain development, hurt their size, you might cause a stillbirth, I don't know. Everyone warns really heavily against that, but they don't really explain why, other than to say, there's a study that says it's not safe. So I started researching. I don't have a lot of trust in the medical establishment for many reasons that I'll go into in another video, and this pregnancy only further confirmed that, not the gestational diabetes, but other things. I had George outside the hospital in the ER entrance on the concrete. He didn't land on the concrete, but I was standing in the concrete because a nurse refused to acknowledge that I was in labor and refused to admit me multiple times. If you guys want that story time, let me know in the comments down below. It is crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy. I started doing my own research, and what she was saying made a lot of sense to me because of what I knew from my mom. I looked into the study that they quote that says, that it's dangerous, and it's this 1 or 2 random tiny studies that were done in the 70s on rats that showed bad outcomes of small birth weights or deformities. So everyone's yeah, your baby will probably instantly die if you accidentally go into ketosis for 5 seconds. And so I didn't feel that was compelling enough evidence to risk having high blood sugars, which we do know the effects of, and they're very bad. And if I had to be put on metformin or insulin, that is a high risk move. Insulin is known to increase stillbirths. It's known to increase lots of very poor outcomes. So we have a known risk here being put on insulin, and it's a lot more risky. And then we have a sort of not very well researched unknown risk, but we know that, there are plenty of, okay, it just didn't make sense to me. I just kept track of my numbers, and I realized that if I could keep my daily total under 100 grams of carbs, then my numbers were normal. My fasting returned to normal, and my after meal numbers were good. So that was kind of my beginning exposure to any form of low carb. And the first thing that happened was not only was my blood sugar controlled, but I did lose 10 pounds in a couple of weeks. And again, I started out obese, so that is not a problem. It should be noted that with my first pregnancy, I, in the third trimester, lost 10 pounds literally over the course of 2 days in my third trimester, and I was eating tons of carbs. I was nowhere near low carb. I hadn't changed my diet at all, just for no reason that I can discern. And I mean, it was so sudden that they were worried like maybe I was losing fluid. They were worried I was like losing amniotic fluid. Like, they did all kinds of tests. No, everything's fine, baby's fine. I just lost 10 pounds and they couldn't figure out why. So for me, on one hand, the 10 pounds could have been related to the change in diet, but also that happened to me in my previous pregnancy around the same time frame. So I don't know. I wasn't very worried about it. My doctor did, he looked at my numbers, saw my numbers, and he said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. You're doing great, but try not to lose any more weight. So I had stopped snacking as much because I just wasn't hungry. Funnily enough, because I was getting, protein and fat and not carbs. And so after he said that, I tried to incorporate more snacks throughout the day to try and force myself to eat so I wouldn't lose any more weight. And it seemed to work. I didn't lose any more weight. The point of all of that is that I managed to stay off of insulin. I kept my numbers under control. I felt absolutely incredible. I felt amazing after giving birth. Part of that I think is because it was also unmedicated, but I also think part of it was my diet leading up to that. Okay, when I was 6 weeks postpartum with my son, and I was feeling really good, and I was recovering amazingly, and I was ready to just, continue losing weight and feel good, I started having horrible gallbladder attacks. Every single one would put me in the hospital, screaming in absolute agony. I should clarify that it was an undiagnosed gallbladder attacks. At the time, we had no idea what they were or why they were happening, and the doctors refused to do an ultrasound because they're dumb, and doctors are dumb. And on the 4th ER trip in, I finally get an ultrasound, which I had been begging for and asking for because I had every classic symptom of gallbladder, which I knew because I Googled it. I figured out that it was a gallbladder on my second attack, and they refused to believe me or test for it. It's fine. I am not bitter. I'm not. It's frustrating to remember, but I'm not. Okay. It is what it is. It happened. And by the way, once they diagnosed me, I did try to eat low fat gallbladders because you're having too much fat. You need to have less fat. That's what's causing the attacks. I end up having a surgery to have my gallbladder removed. Okay. I think it's important to talk about weight a little bit here. I normally don't, but I think it could be helpful. So before I got pregnant with George, I was 228 pounds. I was the heaviest I had ever been. And then in my first and second trimesters with him, I lost 20 pounds. There's really no reason I should have been losing weight. I didn't have bad morning sickness at all. I didn't throw up a single time. So it wasn't like because I was sick. It wasn't because I was eating less. No. So it just seems to me that when I become pregnant, my body, my metabolism just picks up a ton. So I lose 20 pounds total, 14 pounds in the first trimester and then another 6 in the second trimester. Get to the third trimester, I lose another 8 to 10-ish. So all in all, by the time I came home, from the hospital, I was about 200 pounds. So 2022 was rough for me as far as health. I've always prided myself, which pride goes before the fall. I've always prided myself on being very hardy, very healthy, not necessarily thin or fit, but my immune system being strong. I don't let sickness get me down, and I'm strong. In 2022, I had a car wreck that was the worst car wreck I'd ever been in. I had a seizure afterwards, and that scared me bad. I was okay after that, but then I had gestational diabetes and dealing with that. Then I had my fairly traumatic birth, and then to be 6 weeks postpartum and feel like I'm supposed to be kind of putting these major health crises behind me, and then have these horrific 2 weeks of fear and unknown and uncertainty and feeling like these doctors are talking over me. They're misdiagnosing me. I know what's wrong with me, and they refuse to give me these tests. And oh, I just felt like after I had and then I have to have my first surgery. And yeah, it's only laparoscopic surgery, and everyone acted like it was nothing. And it's never nothing to me to put my life in the hands of the doctors. All that being said, it was a tough year, and I was really, really tired of feeling out of control when it came to my health and my body. And I didn't want to be in a position with my next pregnancy to be heavy again, but I was just determined that before my next pregnancy, I wanted to be at a healthier weight. After my gallbladder was removed and the 6 weeks went by that you are supposed to eat low fat, I still was not feeling great. I was still having a ton of digestive issues, despite literally consuming almost no fat. I mean, I was living off of oatmeal with brown sugar in it and skim milk. It was rough. Around that time, I stumbled across Dr. Eric Berg's YouTube channel. It was because I was looking up how to eat after your gallbladder, and I came across one of his videos talking about if you've had your gallbladder out. Through that, I found all of his stuff about keto, and I decided that I wanted to lose weight. I think I was, in some sense, trying to take back control of my body. I felt like not only was it out of my control cosmically, but then with the doctors taking advantage of me and neglecting me or manipulating me, I wanted to take back control over my body and what I consumed in my research. So I kind of feverishly researched. And the main thing that sealed the deal was I came across a documentary called Fat Fiction. It's very good. It's free here on YouTube. I may or may not link it down below. It's got all the information that most keto documentaries have and then some, and it's genuinely filmed in a super interesting way. So I watched that documentary. I felt like my eyes were opened, and that was the moment that I was like, okay, I'm gonna try keto. And I went in my normal way, all or nothing, and so I kind of went this weird health nut version of keto, which is some people's cup of tea, but it's not mine. I like desserts. I'm definitely dirty or lazy keto or whatever. I try to avoid hydrogenated oils and maltodextrin, and other than that, almost everything is fair game for me if it's low carb. I went all in, and I lost 9 pounds in the first week, and then 5 pounds in the second week. So a total of 14 pounds in 2 weeks, which was incredible. I was feeling great, but I thought that I had to do it this very special health nut way. I thought I had to have tons of green stuff with every meal, which now I barely eat vegetables. At this point, I've sort of accidentally become ketovore just because I don't like vegetables and fruit very much anyway. I do occasionally have some green beans. I do like some green beans. The point being that I wasn't eating food that I liked. Some of it I liked, but some of it was just wacky. I wasn't ready. Mentally, I wasn't ready. I wanted to be thin, but I wasn't ready to make a lifestyle change. I just wanted to be thin. So I said I was still having digestive issues on the low-fat diet after my gallbladder. Well, the moment I started keto, those went away. The next day, I stopped having digestive issues, which I think is interesting because obviously I was suddenly having a ton of fat. And what? That's the opposite of what everyone has ever told me. So that was kind of my first foray into keto. I gave up after 2 weeks. I felt like it was too hard. I wasn't prepared. I didn't know about recipes on YouTube. I didn't know how big of a community there was out there, and I didn't know about good stuff. And so I just got discouraged eating the weird health nut food after 2 weeks. And so my milk supply decreased. I kind of panicked, and it was a good excuse anyway. And so I told my husband, okay, we know that keto works. So I'm just going to eat carbs for the rest of the time that I'm nursing my son. And as soon as we wean him, I'll go on keto and lose a bunch of weight. And then, once I'm down to an acceptable weight, then I will, then we can start trying to get pregnant. So that was kind of our loose plan. When my son was about 10 months old, I was pretty heavy again. I think so when I started January 1st of 2022, I think I was 191. So I had gained back already some of the weight, all of the weight that I had lost on keto. Late June, early July, I was 215 pounds. It was just eating carbs. And for my body, if I eat carbs, my body just packs on the pounds. And that was including several attempts to do intermittent fasting. So during one point, I did intermittent fasting, and I think I lost 1 pound after a couple of weeks. And then I gave up on that. That was it was tough. And then at one point I started doing a workout regimen, and, walking or running on the treadmill for 30 minutes to an hour every day. And I didn't lose a single pound from that. That was totally lame. So, I tried other things to just keep the weight from just piling on. But over the course of several months, I put on 25 pounds, which is not great. And this is all while I'm nursing, by the way. And everyone says, if you nurse, the weight will just melt right off. Y'all don't have my insulin resistance, apparently. Cut to July. I'm the heaviest I've been, and I can tell that, I remember I was in despair because I knew that I could lose it all once I went on keto, but it's like the higher the scale went up, the more that I have to lose. I'm getting more and more depressed, and my husband keeps saying, babe, just put him on bottles and start keto. And I basically agree, and I went on keto. Now, funnily enough, I decided this time, I remember thinking to myself, how you start it is how you end it. And that's usually for relationships, right? How it started is how it ends. So if it's hot and heavy in the beginning, then it'll end, suddenly and quick. And so if it's slow and easy. So I decided that instead of jumping into keto with 2 feet first, I was going to do what I called lazy keto, which I didn't know was an actual term that the community uses. I just came up with it or whatever, where I am not tracking my carbs at all, but I am vaguely trying to get towards 20 or so, and I am not going to stress out about it. If there's only carbs, I'm just going to eat a little bit of them, kind of basically portion control for my carbs and as much meat and fat as I want.